Good morning, Shona, not present here. I'm Ramya Devi, working as Assistant Professor in SNS College of Technology. Today I'm going to share a small article regarding how to integrate a front end and a back end using APIs. So before going into the topic, we'll see what are the key components and process behind integrating your front end and back end and also how it works. So the front end and back end integration uses APIs to enable communication and data exchange between the user facing interface and the server-side logic, database, and infrastructure. So this integration allows the front end to send requests, example for data, to the backend and receive responses, making applications dynamic and interactive by handling data processing, storage, and retrieval. So the key components and process behind this, the first is front end. The user interface UI that users see and interact with, and also the backend, the server, application, and database that store and manage the data and application logic. And also in the middle of front end and back end, there lies an APIs, which is application programming interface. So the communication layer that allows the front end and back end to talk to each other. And the most important thing is your HTTP protocol, which is the standard communication protocol used for request and responses between the front end and back end. So we'll see how this integration works. So first we have to send a request. When a user performs an action on the front end, for example, when he clicks a button, the front end code sends an HTTP request to the back end through an API. And here that how the data exchange happens is it might ask the backend to fetch, create or update or delete some data. So the processing of the backend receives the request, it processes it by interacting with the database and performs the requested operation. And also finally it has to send a response. So the backend sends an HTTP response back to the front end, which often contains the requested data. For example, in JSON format or any other status message. And finally, the UI will be updated. So the front end receives the response and updates the UI to display the new data or reflect the changes to the user. So what are the benefits of APIs for integration? So the APIs are mainly used for decoupling, like the front end and back end can be developed, tested and deployed independently, which increases development efficiency. And also the scalability, which allows for user scaling of either the front end or back end components, or the security. APIs can also implement authentication and authorization to ensure secure data exchange. And also it enables the creation of interactive and data driven applications, like it is dynamically functional. So here we are going to see the integration of the front end and back end by solving a problem through an DT based approach. So this is so before going into the topic, we'll see the role of the front end. Like role of the front end is he has to develop an UI by either using any of the languages like HTML, CSS or JavaScript, and the back end is to maintain the database, and it cannot work independently. So the front end and back end will not work independently. So it should have a communication layer called APIs, so which communicates between the front end and back end. So the problem behind is the students often complain about the difficulty in connecting their React-based UI with the Node.js. So React-based UI is an user interface, but the Node.js is a framework which acts as a backend and database, leading to broken or incomplete apps. So due to the connection difficulty of an UI with the Node.js, so it may lead to a broken or an incomplete apps. So for example, Arav, he is studying in a final year of a CSE department, which he wants to build a full stack project for a placement opportunity. So the challenge behind is the APIs, which is used as a communication layer between the front end and the back end, so which is not connecting properly, and it has also throwing an authentication failures, and he also know how to debug. So now we will solve this problem using an design thinking based approach. So design thinking is basically a human centered iterative approach. So by using design thinking, we can divide a problem into five phases. The first phase is an empathy phase, so in which we'll deeply analyze about the problem, either by asking an interview or by giving an interview, or asking some questionnaire to the domain specific people expertise. And after that we will define the problem in a clear manner, and we will generate so many innovative ideas for that how to solve it. And finally we will build a minimum viable product, uh, like a prototype has been developed, and then finally we will test that product. So the first is an empathy phase, in which RF struggles. So the problem behind is the RF struggles with API errors, which delayed the responses from the backend, and also a lack of real-time synchronization between a front end and the backend. So here the problem is the front end does not work, and so that we can't get data from the backend. So how do we define this problem? So difficulty in seamless communication between the UI, which uses a React, HTML, CSS, JS for developing this UI, and also the backend uses Node.js framework and a database. So here in ideate phase, so what are all ideas we can use? So we can use an REST API or a GraphQL API, so that the connectivity may fastly done, and then it can be able to connect between the front end and the back end. And also we can implement an JSON based communication and JSON format, and also we can standardize the error handling and testing tools, so that some modernized tools can be recommended for it. And also we can use cores or middleware for integration. So now in a prototype phase, we can build a prototype, like we can create a React form, and we can call an API, and then we can use an Express.js for routing, and we can place a MongoDB query, and we will get a response from the backend, which can be rendered in the UI. So when it compared to the Stanford T-shaped model, so the vertical depth, so the technical details we have to study for this problem solving is, we have to know the REST API basics like get method, post, put, and delete, and we should know the fetch access calls from React, and Node.js Express routes, and basic SQL queries of how to get the data from MongoDB, and also how to handle the authentication in the middleware. And when we go in a horizontal base, like when we come to a domain based knowledge for this, we have to know about the business logic behind, like e-commerce apps like Amazon like platform, or a food delivery app, or an IoT integrated devices like smart devices which uses backend and user interface. And also we can learn about the AI powered chatbots, so which can be used for integrating the front end and the back. So we can give a small activity regarding this, like we can divide the class into two halves. Like for a front end team, we can name as React Devs, and for the backend team, we can name as API Devs, and then we can create a task for a working login flow, like Exchange API docs plus testing. And also we can give another activity, like we can take a case like a Swiggy order tracking, which tracking is not updating the UI. So like whether we can ask them to find the group, whether the issue in the front end rendering, or an API endpoint, or in a database update. Thank you.